My CEO, mother humiliated me for being a writer for 7 years. But when a publisher accepted my novel, she didn't even open the letter because she was sure it was another rejection, and what happened next left them speechless. I'm 26 years old. I studied literature in college. I work in advertising, and I basically just lived the moment I've been dreaming about since I was 19, but also one of the worst moments of my life with my mother. And I need to tell you this story because I'm still processing everything that happened. I guess I should start by explaining a bit of the context of my relationship with my mom, Elizabeth, because without that, none of what comes next makes sense. My mom is 48 and she's a managing director at a company. She literally made it to the top of her career after growing up in poverty, and that marked everything in her life. You know what I mean? For her, financial stability is the most important thing in the world, and I don't blame her for that. Honestly, because she grew up with nothing and broke her back to get where she is. The problem is that ever since I was a kid, always wanted to be a writer. I remember when I was 10, I was already writing stories in old notebooks, and my dad, William, always supported me, told me I had talent, and that I should follow that dream. My mom never said anything directly against it when I was young, but there was always that tension, like she tolerated my hobby, but never took it seriously. When I went to college to study literature, that's when the problems really started. My mom told me I was wasting my time, that I wasn't going to make money with literature, that I should study business or something practical. We had horrible fights during those 4 years, but my dad was always there backing me up, and that made everything more bearable. I finished my degree and got a job in advertising, which calmed my mom down a bit because at least I was making money. But I never stopped writing. At 19, I started my novel. And for the next 7 years, I worked on it every night after coming home from work. Every weekend. Every free moment I had. My dad died 2 years ago from a heart attack, and that changed everything. He was like 50 when it happened. It was super sudden, and I was devastated because he was my biggest support. After that, the Wednesday dinners at my mom's house became this obligatory but tense thing, where she basically criticized me for continuing with my writing, asked me when I was going to mature and focus on my real career, that kind of thing. I tried to stay calm because I had just lost my dad and didn't want to lose my mom too, but every comment felt like a knife, honestly. During these last 3 years, I was sending my novel to different publishers. I got like 15 rejections, maybe more. I don't know. I lost count at some point. Each rejection was horrible, and my mom always had that "I told you so" tone when she saw me sad. She never said "I told you so" directly, but I felt it in every look, in every silence. A few months ago, like in February or March of this year, I sent my manuscript to one more publisher, and I swore to myself that if they rejected me again, I'm going to stop trying. I couldn't take the pressure anymore. The constant disappointment, and part of me thought that maybe my mom was right and I was chasing something impossible. Like 6 weeks passed, and one day I came home from work, and there was a letter from the publisher. I stood there staring at it for like 10 minutes without opening it because I was too scared. My hands were literally shaking. I finally opened it and started reading, and basically the letter said they loved my novel and wanted to publish it. I had to read that line like 5 times because I couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? I started crying right there, standing in my living room. I called my best friend screaming with excitement. It was one of the best moments of my life. I felt that everything I had worked for during 7 years had finally paid off. The first thing I thought after the initial euphoria was that I had to tell my mom. I know it sounds weird considering how little she supported my writing, but I guess part of me needed her approval, needed her to tell me she was proud of me, that I had been right to keep trying. I decided not to tell her anything over the phone. I wanted to see her face when I told her, so I kept the letter in my purse and waited until the next Wednesday for dinner. Wednesday came, and I went to my mom's house like always. She had made pasta, which is what she almost always makes because she knows I like it, and we were eating and talking about normal things. Work, the weather, nothing important. I was super nervous because I had the letter in my purse and was waiting for the perfect moment to take it out and give her the news. And we finished eating and were having tea in the living room when I noticed there was a letter on the coffee table. I recognized it immediately because it had the publisher's logo, and I realized the publisher had sent a copy to my mom's address. I guess because at some point I put her as a secondary contact or something. I asked my mom about the letter and she said, "Oh yeah, it came yesterday but I haven't opened it. I assumed it was another rejection and didn't want you to feel bad." And that's when something in me broke, because she hadn't even considered the possibility that it might be good news. She automatically assumed it was another failure. I tried to stay calm and told her to open it, but she kept drinking her tea and said, "Claire, honey, I think it's time we seriously talk about this writing thing." And then she started with the speech I had heard 1,000 times before. She told me I had tried enough, that it was time to be realistic, that I should focus on my career in advertising instead of wasting my time on something that clearly wasn't going to work out. I was sitting there feeling angrier and angrier, but she kept talking. Then she said something that made me explode. She said, "And if you're thinking about quitting your job to focus on writing full-time, I'm warning you that I'm not going to support you financially. You need to understand that this dream isn't realistic, and I'm not going to allow you to ruin your life over this." That's when I completely lost my temper. I stood up and told her to open the damn letter. She was surprised by my tone because I almost never yell at her, but she took the letter and opened it. I watched her read, watched her eyes move across the paper, and then she looked at me and said, "This says they accepted your book." And I said, "Yes, Mom. They accepted my book. They're going to publish it. And I came here excited to tell you, thinking you'd be proud of me, but you didn't even open the letter because you were so sure it was going to be another rejection that you didn't even consider that maybe, just maybe, your daughter has talent." My mom immediately tried to change her tone, started saying things like, "Congratulations, honey. This is wonderful. I knew you'd make it," but I was already too angry. I told her that she had literally just told me 30 seconds ago that my dream wasn't realistic and that she wasn't going to support me, and now that she knew I'd been accepted, she was trying to pretend she'd always believed in me. I yelled at her. Even though I'm not normally a yeller, I told her that she had never had faith in me, that she had always made me feel like I was wasting my time, and that all I wanted was for her to tell me she was proud of me. But clearly that was too much to ask. She tried to apologize, said she was sorry, that she was excited for me, that she had said those things because she was worried about my financial future. But I couldn't be there anymore. I grabbed my things and left, and I can honestly say I had never been so angry with her in my life. I got home crying, not from sadness but from pure frustration and rage, because the moment I had dreamed about for years had been ruined by my mom's lack of faith in me. The next few days were horrible. My mom called me constantly, sent me long text messages apologizing, but I didn't want to talk to her. I asked her to give me space and stop contacting me for a while, and eventually she did, although I know it was hard for her. I signed the contract with the publisher, started the editing process for the book. It should have been the happiest time of my life, but I felt empty. I didn't have my dad to share the news with, and my relationship with my mom was destroyed. Like 2 weeks passed and I started feeling really lonely. My dad had died, my mom and I weren't talking, and even though I had friends who were happy for me, it wasn't the same as having your family's support, you know what I mean? I started considering calling my mom, maybe giving her another chance, because at the end of the day, I only had her as close family. I finally sent her a message saying we could try to talk if she wanted, and she responded immediately saying yes, to visit her whenever I wanted. I went to her house on a Saturday afternoon. She had cooked my favorite food, roast chicken with potatoes. Clearly she was making an effort. We sat down to eat and she started apologizing again, said she had been too harsh with me over the years, that she understood why I was upset, that she really was happy they had published my book. I told her I appreciated the apology, but that I needed her to understand how much her lack of support had hurt me, especially after losing Dad, who had always been my biggest fan. We were having this relatively productive conversation when she said something that ruined everything. She said, and this is an exact quote because I'm never going to forget her exact words. She said, "I'm sorry I was so negative about your writing, but I have to be honest with you, Claire. I don't think you're a particularly talented writer. Your work is very difficult to understand, and it's not my type of literature, but I'm glad someone wants to publish it." I sat there processing what she had just said, and I literally felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I started crying. Not normal crying, but hysterical crying. And I told her, "How can you tell me that? You just said you regretted being negative, and now you're directly telling me I'm not good." She tried to explain herself, said she was just being honest, that she thought it was important for me to know her real opinion, but I couldn't listen to her anymore. I stood up and left, still crying. I couldn't believe she thought that was the appropriate moment to tell me that she basically thought my writing was mediocre. After everything we'd been through, after I had finally gotten published. I drove home crying so much I probably shouldn't have been driving, and when I got there, I threw myself on the bed and cried for hours. I felt completely shattered. Like my whole achievement meant nothing because my own mother didn't believe in my talent. Another week passed without us talking, and this time it was me who wasn't answering her calls and messages. I finally answered one of her calls on a Thursday night, and we had this super awkward conversation where she asked how I was, and I gave one-word answers. At some point, she asked me how work in advertising was going, and I told her, I quit, and there was this long silence on the other end of the phone. I explained that the contract with the publisher included a decent advance, enough to live comfortably for at least a year while I worked on my second book and did promotions for the first one, and that I had decided to take the risk of dedicating myself to writing full-time. She started to say something, probably some criticism, but I interrupted her and told her I had already made the decision, that my dad would have been proud of me, and that I was hanging up because I had things to do. I hung up before she could respond and felt terrible but also relieved in a way. Sunday morning, I was in my pajamas, working on ideas for my second book, when someone knocked on the door. It was my mom. I hadn't invited her or knew she was coming, and she looked horrible, like she hadn't slept in days. She asked if she could come in, and I let her in, although part of me wanted to close the door in her face. We sat in my living room, and she started crying, something I had almost never seen her do, except at my dad's funeral. She told me she had been a horrible mother, that she had let her own fears and insecurities ruin our relationship, that when she criticized me for pursuing writing, she was actually projecting her own fears of ending up poor again. She said that growing up in poverty had been so traumatic for her that she became obsessed with financial security, and when she saw me choosing an unstable career, she was terrified that I would end up suffering like she had suffered as a child. Then she said something that made me cry too. She said that my dad always told her she needed to learn to support me, even if she didn't understand my decisions, and that he was right, that she had been wrong all this time. She told me she had no excuse for what she had said to me about my writing the last time we saw each other, that it had been cruel and unnecessary, and that if I didn't want to talk to her again, she would understand. But please know that she was deeply sorry. We were crying together for a while, and eventually I told her I wanted to have a relationship with her, but that we needed help because clearly we couldn't fix this alone. I suggested we go to therapy together, and she agreed immediately. We've had 3 sessions so far with a family therapist, and things are slowly improving. My mom is learning to express her concerns without being critical, and I'm learning to understand where her fears come from without taking everything so personally. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect now, because it's not. I still have resentment. It still hurts that she never believed in me when I needed it most, but we're working on it. My book comes out in 4 months, and my mom says she's going to be at the launch, that she's going to buy like 20 copies to give to her acquaintances. And even though I know part of her probably still doesn't understand my work, at least she's trying, and that's something. Last week, she asked me if she could read the final manuscript before it was published. I gave her a copy, and she told me she'd read it with an open mind. I don't know what she's going to think. Honestly, I don't know if she'll ever like my writing, but I guess I'm learning that I don't need her validation to know I'm good at this. A publisher believed in my work enough to publish it, and that has to be enough. I miss my dad every day, especially now that I'm living the dream he always wanted for me. Sometimes I wonder what everything would have been like if he were still alive, if things with my mom wouldn't have gotten so bad. But there's no point in thinking about that. The reality is that I'm here. I'm going to be a published author. I have a complicated but repairing relationship with my mom, and even though the road here was much harder and more painful than I imagined, I made it. And that's what matters, I guess.